Hello there. Welcome into a Friday edition of the show. So incredibly glad to have you. Whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, listening on the fine piece of technology that is the Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. It's free to download and free to use. And I heard once that if it's free, it's for me. But me is you and everybody. 719-247-1313. I didn't realize that this Brian Robinson trade was going to strike the nerve that it has. So we'll continue that debate. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. I didn't even think Brian Robinson was going to be one of the three stories that are driving the show. I had other ones planned. Don't get me wrong. Love it. Let's converse. Let's talk about this. It's clearly a polarizing move. Got on the text line, some for, some against. And we'll get back into that conversation in short order. But in the meantime, if you'll allow me, here are the three stories that are driving the show. All right, let's start with the Broncos. Subject to story number one.
Coach, will you call plays this week? Someone else?
No, I will. I will. Yep.
Sean Payton not leaving anything to chance tomorrow in New Orleans for two reasons. One, it's his former team, and even though he left under his own, I was going to say under his own power, like he was hurt, left on his own terms. Anytime you go around your former employer, former girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband, even if you're happy and content with your life, you still want to make sure that you are at your best. And the Broncos at their best is when Sean Payton is calling plays. So a trip to New Orleans means Sean Payton's calling the plays. But also, the Broncos need to finish out the preseason a little stronger than they started it. 3 drives, only 3 points. The only reason they got those 3 points was because Jaquan McMillan picked off a pass to put them in great field position. Like, if you recall, against the 49ers backups, the Broncos offense did not look very good. And Sean Payton has stressed the importance of a fast start to this season. Yeah, it's Tennessee and Indianapolis. Insert your own joke here. But then it's the Chargers, then it's the Bengals, then it's the Eagles. And this is the last chance for the Broncos to get prepared for the season. But also, I kind of like the way this is set up for the Denver Broncos, because you make last week the more meaningless game, and it was forced, right? Because you had the 2 joint practices, so Sean Payton was trying to give his most important players some rest. But now, how often do we have preseasons? And by how often, the answer is all of them. Is the last preseason game a throwaway? Unless you're super into guys 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, and so on a team's roster. Right? That's the throwaway one. Yeah, you're not going to see so-and-so. Well, you're going to see all the Broncos so-and-sos. I think it's actually kind of a good way to finish out the preseason. Put your best players out there, even if it's 8 to 10 plays. If they look better than they did against San Francisco, then it will be, finishing the preseason strong, putting a bow on their preseason preparations. And I think that's part of Sean Payton's thinking here. This is a guy who cares about the preseason. This is a guy who cares about the first month of the regular season. Call sheet in hand, number ones on the field. See if the Broncos can put together a good performance for their last preseason game. Beyond that, it's the running backs. It's who gets Devon Vele's roster spot. It's the roster bubble. But I don't know about you. I would always sign up for players 1 through 22 on a particular roster playing in a preseason game. As far as me as a viewer. And you'll get that tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. on KKTV. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the NFL.
When we wanted to send the details to the agent told us to stick it up our ass.
That is the undeniable voice of Jerry Jones on the Michael Irvin podcast as the back and forth between Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones continues. And this, to me, is so drawn. The battle lines have been drawn across generations. Because you have Jerry Jones, who thinks that a handshake constitutes a legally binding agreement. And you have Micah Parsons, who is of the generation that if you have some people around Micah's age or younger in your work, at your job, you'll notice that there are certain things like they don't put in extra hours unless they're going to get overtime. They don't let vacation days slip away. And I'm not saying these are bad things, but I know I have not held myself to that standard. I might have 1,000 vacation days by now. I know I don't take them, and it's not, I should. That's what I'm saying. I should take vacation days. I don't. But all of that kind of stuff that you see from a younger generation is about being leery of being taken advantage of by an employer. And so while Micah Parsons might say that, wow, that sounds great, Jerry, that you're going to make me the highest paid non-quarterback ever, which Jerry Jones says he was going to make Micah Parsons. But Micah is worried about the third line of the 5th paragraph on page 8, where if he's, shakes Jerry Jones's hand, and that constitutes a legally binding agreement, and then the contract itself is put in front of him, and Micah Parsons has to sign it without his agent present, who knows what could have been thrown in there? This is why you have an agent. And that's just the thing about this that is so hard to wrap your head around. Why Jerry Jones is so anti-agent. Like it seems like Jerry Jones is trying to take advantage of Micah Parsons, doesn't it? He's trying to put something into the contract that he can exercise at some point that is going to screw over Micah Parsons. Like, that's what it sounds like. That's how Jerry Jones, it shouldn't be a big deal that he meets with the agent. And Jerry Jones is like, well, now the agent is telling me to stick it where the sun don't shine. Yeah, because you tried to go around him to his client to get him to agree to a contract that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, there's no doubt Jerry Jones is in the wrong here. But this, ultimately, all that matters is, will it end differently than CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott and Zach Martin? Will it end differently? Micah Parsons is in Dallas for their preseason game. He will obviously not play. He has scrubbed his social media of any mention of the Cowboys, which to people Micah Parsons' age and younger is a very big deal. And he's already formally requested a trade. He's certainly emptying the clip when it comes to all the things that he can do to try and get the deal that he wants or get Jerry Jones to bend to his will. We'll see if it ends up working out. And if it doesn't, is Micah Parsons willing to do what so many people recently with the Dallas Cowboys aren't willing to do, and that's miss games? Emmitt Smith was back in the day. Will it end differently? It feels different right now. It feels more contentious, but ultimately will it end differently than CeeDee Lamb, Zach Martin, Dak Prescott? That remains to be seen. But Jerry Jones, like, dude, it's 2025. Handshake means nothing. And you can lament that all day if you want. Right? You can lament the fact that a handshake is not as good as a legally binding document and that a man's word is not his bond anymore. That's fine. But that doesn't get Micah Parsons to sign on the dotted line. You have to negotiate in the year 2025. And Jerry Jones seems unwilling to do that. Is unwilling. Not seems, he is. Story number 3 today has no audio accompaniment, and it is fitting because nothing is exactly what the Rockies got out of the Nolan Arenado trade. And you're like, why are you bringing this up again? Austin Gomber got released today. The lone survivor of the return for Nolan Arenado has been cut by the Colorado Rockies. A pitcher cut by the Rockies. I would rethink my entire life if that happened to me. But then again, I would never be in that position. The Rockies would never want me to pitch for them. So I guess 6 one way, half dozen the other. But Austin Gomber gets cut. Aluris Montero is now playing in Japan. 3 prospects that the Rockies got back for Nolan Arenado never made it to the major leagues, and the Rockies had to pay the Cardinals $50 million. But with all that being said, their half of the agreement is gone. Their half of the trade is over. That book is closed. Not to say that it's not going to be brought up ever again, but there is no tie to that trade that fundamentally altered the trajectory of the Rockies franchise. Arguably the biggest, most significant trade they've ever made is now history. It happened 4 years ago. And there is nothing left from it on the Rockies side. Yeah, I don't know how much the Cardinals benefited from the trade, but I'll tell you what, the Rockies took the big fat L on that trade, as if you needed today's news to convince you of that. Not a single thing they got back for the Cardinals, not a single person, is with the Colorado Rockies 4 years after the trade. Amazing. Sometimes you just got to sit back and marvel at how terrible that organization is at doing baseball things. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the stories that are driving the show. And as promised, we'll get to your text about the Brian Robinson deal. Brian Robinson, leading running back rusher for the Washington Commanders last year, shipped to the 49ers for a mere 6th-round pick. Christian McCaffrey has some help in that backfield, has a chance to maybe take a load off every once in a while, and the Commanders are down a guy that gave them about 800 yards rushing last year. Your thoughts? 719-247-1313. Taking your thoughts on a Friday. You can comment if you're watching the show on social media, as Eric has chosen to do, and I can even put on the screen like this. Fancy. By far, talking about the Nolan Arenado trade, the worst trade in the history of Colorado sports, maybe even in the history of baseball. Do we call the Babe Ruth deal a trade? Colorado sports, I think you have to, I think absolutely you have to say it is. And here's the reason why. There's a recent competitor, and it's the Russell Wilson trade. I think what separates that, because you could argue that the Broncos got as much out of Russell Wilson as the Rockies got out of Austin Gomber. Like, it wasn't good. They lost the trade. It was a bad move. But it was done by a team that had nothing going for it. Right? The Broncos at that time had nothing going for them. George Payton had to take a big swing to try and get this team back to the postseason. And he swung and missed spectacularly. So celebrate his getting a 4th-round pick for Devon Vele all you want. He's also the guy that traded for Russell Wilson and hired Nathaniel Hackett. Okay, so like, no, Po Buddy's nerfed is the point I'm trying to get at. But for the Broncos, it was a big swing for a team that had nothing else, no other avenue, right? They were trying to get Rodgers. They got, left at the altar in that situation. So they went to plan B, and it didn't work. And it was a disaster. And it's still costing the Broncos to some extent because of the dead cap hit. So that's a really bad trade too. But the difference is the Rockies were in the midst of some of their best baseball in their history. Right? Things were good for the Colorado Rockies at that time. They were a playoff contender. The Broncos, without making the move for Russell Wilson, would not have been a playoff contender. Coincidentally, they weren't a playoff contender with Russell Wilson, but you get what I'm saying. In order to make themselves good, they had to take a swing like that. And they whiffed terribly. But the Rockies did this when they were in the midst of like being good. So I think, Eric, you're 100% right that it is the worst trade in the history of Colorado sports. He adds, but the Broncos didn't give up a Hall of Famer to get Russell Wilson. Actually, the Broncos got a Hall of Famer that turned out to be washed up. Are we sure Russell Wilson's a Hall of Famer? I don't know about you. I've been listening to Dan Patrick bring up this question every day, it seems like. The Stafford Wilson thing. I've heard all the arguments. I think Russell Wilson is playing himself out of the Hall of Fame. I really do. Now, I say that, and Eli Manning is going to get into the Hall of Fame. So if Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer, then absolutely Russell Wilson is a Hall of Famer. But by my standards, Russell Wilson is playing himself out of the Hall of Fame, which I think is possible. It is a thing, and he is doing it. But you're right. The Broncos did get the better, perceived to be the better player in the deal. The Rockies didn't. We knew they lost the trade immediately, and they have since continued to lose the trade. So I think you're right. But the Broncos did give up a lot to get Russell Wilson. And unlike the Cardinals players that the Rockies acquired, the Seahawks still have some players that they got in the Russell Wilson trade. Not Noah Fant. He's with the Bengals. Did you see that? Noah Fant, now a member of the Cincinnati Bengals. Did we have it wrong all this time? Is Noah Fant a pass rusher? Because I cannot believe that the Cincinnati Bengals, when they make a move, would be adding to the offensive side of the football. But they picked up Noah Fant, who will fill in nicely for Trey Hendrickson as a pass rusher, apparently. Noah Fant's not there. Drew Lock was there, left, came back. But some of the draft picks that Seattle had, those guys are still kicking around. You're right. We're agreeing, Eric. I'm just saying what would be the next one up after Nolan Arenado? It would be Russell Wilson. Here's why the Nolan Arenado trade is, to your point, so much worse. Appreciate it. From the 571, the Rockies were good. Come on, what are you talking about, Willis? They were good. Remember? I know it's hard to imagine. The Rockies were a good baseball team at that time. They were. And they gave them up. Let's get back into the Brian Robinson trade. From the 571, why would you poo-poo a 5th-round pick to Frisco for Debo? Samuel is still better than Brian Robinson, who is a fine football player. Wait, weren't you just telling me that Brian Robinson isn't any good? Didn't you just say that? Samuel's got 19 yards and only one running play against Cincinnati. Top-rated defense, but still a terrible defense. I didn't. I thought that the trade itself, I didn't have a big problem with them acquiring Debo Samuel. I'm just saying, I said at the time that Debo Samuel is not what he once was. But you're giving up a 5th-round pick. It's the same. The 49ers are acquiring a decent player for not much. And so were the Commanders. Except Brian Robinson has more left in the tank, I think, than Debo Samuel. But the idea was there that the Commanders should be adding to the roster, and they did with Debo, so fine. It's just that they didn't add Debo Samuel. They added this version of Debo Samuel. There's not that argument with Brian Robinson. The guy had 800 yards last year. He probably would have been Washington's leading rusher had he not missed games. He missed 3 games, so he ends up having fewer rushing yards than Jaden Daniels. I'm not predicting the demise of the Commanders. I cannot stress that enough. I'm just saying it's curious as to why you would give up Brian Robinson when he was by far your best running back last year. By far he was. Albert, 5 years ago, the entire football world was up in arms about how the running back is not needed and good ones can be found under the age of 27 on just about any street corner. It was an outdated position. Now the tables are turning again. Why? What was old is new, and it continues to go round and around. I think what we're finding with the running back situation is I hope we're finding the happy medium. Yes, you can approximate, and this is, I think, what the Commanders are kind of banking on. I actually think they're going to add someone to that room. And that's why I say maybe Adam Peters is up to something. I'm just questioning it in the moment, but saying Adam Peters must have something else in mind. And we'll find out when cutdown day comes around. Opened up a few bucks. Maybe they can pluck a better running back off the free agent market. Who knows? But yes, you can. There's only one small group of truly elite running backs that you cling to for dear life, and everyone else is pretty interchangeable. But the importance of a running game, that's where people went wrong. Devaluing an individual running back, I don't think was totally off. But it got to the point where people were devaluing the running game and saying, well, it's a passing league. You don't need running backs anymore. That's not true. You still need a running game. But can you create it for less money than you used to be able to? And when it's Derrick Henry or Josh Jacobs or Saquon Barkley, it's a different story. But that's like the quarterback thing. Like there are a few quarterbacks, there's 4 quarterbacks, and everyone else you have major question marks about. But yep, we do this. Tom says, stop with the Eli Manning shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame garbage. He beat the greatest quarterback that has ever played football twice in the biggest game. End of discussion. I didn't realize that Eli Manning sacked Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. I'm just I know what you mean. And that's fine. Celebrate him for that. I didn't realize that 2 games, even Super Bowls, make someone's Hall of Fame case. I didn't realize that somebody could get in just because they had 2 really good games. I thought it was more of a body of work thing. I don't know. Everybody has their own standard. And I'm not the only person that says Eli Manning's not a Hall of Famer. That's fine. Like Eli has that, and he can bring that up every time he has his own ESPN show. Like we don't need to diminish what he did in those games. But should we talk about, and I know it's not the same as Eli, but should Trent Dilfer automatically be in consideration for the Hall of Fame? Should Brad Johnson? Does just winning a Super Bowl put you in that conversation? I know who Eli beat, and he would have a better case than those guys. But again, the body of work, the entirety of the career. But Eli will get in. And I will have to call him a Hall of Famer. I will refer to him as such. But man, Eli picked 2 really good days to bring his A game. I'll say that. Brett says, and after the Rockies traded him, the lack of baseball knowledge fans filled the stadium enough to make Monfort's a profit, and that is what it's all about. Fans need to stop going, put bags over their heads. They're not even doing that. And I said, like this boycott, like it is a pipe dream. No one's going to boycott Coors Field. It's just not going to happen. And by the way, most of the people in the stands this past few days are Dodger fans. So it's never going to happen. But if you're a Rockies fan, is it the 10 cents that King Soopers charges you? Is that what's the barrier here? We need more paper bags on the heads of Rockies fans. Don't see enough of it. I'm with you, Brett. Lampshade on the head. It's happening. I get what you're saying, Tom. I understand. And I'm not saying that Eli Manning is the worst quarterback in the history of football, and I'm exaggerating my position. I am saying that Eli Manning, people are overlooking a lot of mediocrity for the 2 days that he was amazing. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to be on that side. I'm going to be on the side of I'll take this with that and I'll add it all up and I'll say not enough. By the way, Kurt Warner wasn't a sure thing for me. It's the most important position. It's the position of the most esteem in all of sports. I think it's okay to have a little bit higher standard. I've evolved into a bigger Hall of Fame guy. But there are exceptions to every rule. At the quarterback position, that's the best of the best. That's the most important position. I think the standard should be higher than a linebacker or a wide receiver or running back. Those can be stat accumulations, but positions. I think with quarterbacks, it's everything. It's the numbers. It's the titles. It's all that for me. And that's why I say I think Russell Wilson's playing himself out of the Hall of Fame, and I wouldn't put Eli Manning in. But he's going to get in. Like so many things I rail against on this radio show, I'm powerless to stop it, but it's going to happen. Just don't agree. Eric coming in. Eli has a .500 career winning percentage. His 17-game average over his career would be an 8-9 record with a 60% completion percentage. 26 touchdowns to 18 interceptions. That's his average year. So that leads Eric to maybe agree with me on Eli, but disagree with me on Russell Wilson, saying, yeah, Russell Wilson is way better, so yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. But this is the argument that they put up on the Dan Patrick Show, and I think there's validity to it. But I say that Russell Wilson is playing himself out of the Hall of Fame, meaning he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory. And it's just that it has been so bad this second act of his career that I think it should hold weight. But what Dan Patrick brings up, and I think it's a valid point, if you flipped Russell Wilson's career, you would essentially have Matthew Stafford's career. Now, I can't totally buy into that because Matthew Stafford was a prolific passer, a better passer than Russell Wilson was, even when he was with Detroit. But the premise is Matthew Stafford, everybody is saying that he's getting in, and it's because he has closed out his career strong, and people don't feel the same way about Russell Wilson because of how he is ending it. It's like a movie. It's like a movie. How many movies have you watched and been entertained for an hour and a half? In the last 30 minutes, you're like, this has ruined the entire movie. I would argue that if Matthew Stafford's career was a movie, it would have been a good movie that turned out great, that ended great. And I would walk out of that theater very happy with the money I spent. I don't think it's completely apples to apples because I think Matthew Stafford has, for the majority of his career, had this, if he ever wins, he is definitely in there because the numbers he put up, despite the organization and the teammates around him, if he just wins something, he's going to be in. But again, I understand the argument. Russell Wilson is being hurt by the fact that he started his career so well and is ending it so poorly. And should that be the way people look at it, or should they look at it in its totality? And that's why DP does the flip Russell Wilson's career and say whether he's a Hall of Famer. And we'll do that. We won't do that, but we'll take it in its entirety. We'll look at it from beginning to end. That's why I say he's playing himself out of the Hall of Fame. If he has a decent year this year for the Giants, or let's say he has a mediocre year and he calls it a career and he stops the bleeding and says, I'm done, I'm walking away, he could maybe still get in. But the longer he goes and he bounces around and he's not a very good quarterback, it makes it worse. It hurts his case for the Hall of Fame. 719-24-7. 13-13. Eric chiming in, looking at Russell Wilson. Yeah, that's Dan Patrick's point. Russell Wilson has a better overall case than Matthew Stafford does. And all I am saying is Russell Wilson needs to stop damaging that Hall of Fame resume. He's detracting from it. And once his career is all said and done, and we can take and take a step, and that's why there's the waiting period, right? We could kind of cool down a little bit. We could take a minute, then look at the entirety of Russell Wilson's career. And I think there's a very good chance that he gets into the Hall of Fame. And again, if Eli's getting in, I'm not saying Russell Wilson at this point is not a Hall of Famer, but I'm saying the trajectory he is currently on, he is playing himself out of it. And he needs to either close out strong this year with the Giants or cut his losses after this year. Seven 719-24-7. 13-13 back after this. Text coming in. Russell Wilson is dying ugly as he deserves. He's not a Hall of Fame quarterback. Tom chiming back in. Is Phillip Rivers a Hall of Famer? No. He's not. And we don't have enough time today because the show's almost over. But one of these days we can have a fun debate of whether you'd rather be Eli Manning or Phillip Rivers. It's one metric. I'm not saying this is the Bible when it comes to Hall of Fame candidacy, but Pro Football Reference, and Eric, I'm sure you probably stumbled across this too when you were comparing Eli and Russell Wilson. They do a Hall of Fame score, basically. Some of the quarterbacks that we're going to be discussing coming up soon: Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, Russell Wilson, Eli Manning, Matthew Stafford will all be, according to this metric, below average Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And look, there's no one number. This is why Hall of Fame debates are great for this medium, because it's subjective. It's not objective. There's not one thing you can look at. It's just what do you put a greater weight on? And ultimately, when you add everything up, are they going to be Hall of Famers? But using this metric, by the way. So let's say that the list I just mentioned, Rivers, Roethlisberger, Eli, all from the same draft, Stafford, Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, you could say maybe some of those. I would guess that you would not say all of them are Hall of Famers. You'd probably draw the line somewhere, right? They would be in a group with Starr, Bradshaw, Staubach, Stabler. The reason I bring that up, I'm not trying to say that those guys are not Hall of Famers, but they played in a very different time. They played in a time that quarterbacking was not what it is now. And sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, timing can be everything. You have these quarterbacks that by this metric score about as well as those in a time where everybody and their cousin can throw for 3,000 yards. Right? Not saying that every quarterback in the NFL is great, but everybody puts up numbers. You have to be pretty bad to not put up numbers. So, yeah, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, they're going to be more prolific than Bart Starr, or we'll have to be careful because Bart Starr and Terry Bradshaw rank currently above Russell Wilson and Eli Manning. Rivers and Roethlisberger are above Bart Starr and Terry Bradshaw. We have to be a little bit careful and say, should we hold these guys to a higher standard in terms of, okay, you may have thrown for X number 1,000 more yards than they did, but you're doing it at a very different time when guys throw for a lot of yards. So do we just say because Russell Wilson and Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger were more prolific passers than Bart Starr and Ken Stabler that they automatically deserve to get in? Or should we look at them a little bit differently? I look at them a little bit differently. I think in a passing league where the numbers are dwarfing anything that happened before I was born, I think it takes a little bit more. It can't just be stat accumulation. To your question, Tom, about Phillip Rivers. Now, he did all he could. Right? And he's a little Matt Stafford-y, right? In that you look at some of his failures to win not necessarily being his fault. But I think it's okay to draw the line and say, you know what, just because all these guys threw for more yards than the quarterbacks of yesteryear, we don't have to put them in. Because it's a different time. I would suggest, if you want to check it out, it's just interesting. Average Hall of Fame quarterback, they have a score. So like Tom Brady, Manning, Rodgers, Favre, Unitas, Montana, Breeze, Elway, Marino, these are all guys well above the average, right? These are the elite of the elite. These are Mount Rushmore type guys. And then they have the average Hall of Fame quarterback. So Ryan, Mahomes right this second, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, Russell Wilson, Eli, Stafford. These are all guys that if they were voted in today would be below average for what that position is in the Hall of Fame. So this idea, I guess I would leave it here. If you want to put Eli Manning in the Hall of Fame because of the 2 games where he beat Brady, because that was a modern day dynasty, okay. But the idea that he's not is not a crazy concept. Any of the guys I just mentioned, you can make the case they are not Hall of Fame quarterbacks. It's just, what are the other things? You know, Ben Roethlisberger with the Super Bowls. Phillip Rivers with no Super Bowls. But more passing yards. Weigh all these things together. But it's not crazy to say Russell Wilson's not a Hall of Famer. It's not crazy to say Eli's not a Hall of Famer. It's not crazy to say Phillip Rivers isn't a Hall of Famer. It depends on where you set the bar. And if you set the bar low enough that they get in, you still have to acknowledge that they don't quite stack up with some of the all-time Mount Rushmore greats. And if that's okay with you, then you're generally a bigger Hall of Fame guy. And I also go to the story of the NFL, which actually would bode well for Eli, Tom, because I think that those Super Bowl wins are among the most significant in the history of the NFL. And they deserve to be chronicled in the Hall of Fame. And how do you do that? Well, you got to put someone in from that team. You got to put in Kaufman, or you got to put in Eli, or you. So I'm not saying you don't have a case. But I just don't. I would say let's find another way. Let's find another person. Maybe there's not. Good conversation. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend. Broncos tomorrow. Switchbacks late tomorrow night, 8:30 if you're so inclined. And we'll come back on Monday. And then guess what? The next NFL game that we watch will count. How about that? Also, enjoy the college football. We got a doubleheader for you tomorrow. We got Farmageddon in Dublin, Iowa State, Kansas State at 10. And then at 4:30, it will be Fresno State and Kansas. Enjoy your weekend.